Sir Iain, thank you for joining us. You, of course, have been very clear about where we should stand with China, which is why you are one of the number of MPs sanctioned by China. I'm not sure a country you'd feel safe to go to anyway, even without that sanctioning. But, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the Prime Minister to really kind of step up, toughen his stance with China. There's a lot of concern that we're talking about thousands of spies, such as Yang Tengbo, H6 as he was known until yesterday, getting close to people like Prince Andrew, getting photographs with the two prime ministers and another member of the royal family, and basically getting to the heart of the British establishment. First of all, how big is the threat? And second of all, what should we do about it?
Well, yes, Julia, thank you for coming me on. I think the main problem is to understand that China poses the single greatest threat that we face at the moment since the Cold War. It's not me that's saying that alone. President Xi of China has made it very clear his ambition is to be the powerful nation that can dictate to others. He's talked about the last 200 years as an aberration in democracy. He's made the very simple point that the right form of government is his form of government, that democracy is just a passing fad, and that in actual fact people are happier when they're told what to do rather than them having choices about who governs them. He's clear about that. He set a target to build up his military. I'll give you a fact which is quite interesting. Right under our eyes, China has about 230 times the capability of the United States to build ships, naval ships at the moment. One shipyard in China builds at the moment more naval ships than the United States of America. One shipyard. They're doing this in open view, and their view is to have a navy that can compete directly with the United States and probably beat it. And the army is being built up as well. It's probably the largest army now in the world, and it's growing in strength and potency. So those military aspects go on. In the meantime, domestically, China practices genocide on the Uyghur in Xinjiang and using them for slave labor. Loads of Tibetans, 250,000 of them, are at the moment in incarceration camps who are being used as forced slave labor. I'll give you a very good example of what goes on. That they are the biggest organ harvester in the world. They do this through the executions. They sell more organs to everybody else. And, of course, they export solar arrays and everything else to do with net zero to us, which has got slave labor components. And we now discover, of course, they were shipping tomatoes via Italy that had slave labor again from Xinjiang. So the list goes on, and they are a distinct threat.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. They are a distinct threat. You've been talking about this for a long time. We've been talking on the show about this, but it seems the establishment is just still a bit starry-eyed about any amount of money. And of course, we see their roots, their tentacles reaching into the whole of academia and to our establishment. And again, we know that someone like Prince Andrew, a useful idiot for countries like China, and indeed many of the so rather questionable billionaire figures from various countries around the world. I mean, basically, he's never met a dodgy billionaire he doesn't like. Should we put it that way? But he's an easy target. But that has enabled people like this spy, Yang Tengbo, so alleged spy, to get his tentacles in. Talk about the threat now. Look, I'm assuming that we are also spying on China, and that we've got British people over there, or people who bought and paid for, or whatever, in China doing similar work. Why should anyone be worried about that if we're doing exactly the same? I'm assuming the Chinese are, the French are, and everyone else is as well.
Yeah, listen, of course we have to be careful, and our national security requires that we know what people are up to. But China is on a whole different scale. So the real threat comes from this huge organization, and it's just astonishing. 40,000 people in it. They have networks all over the world. And they have huge networks in the UK. There are many, many Chinese students, pretty much taken over most of the foreign student population in our universities. Yeah. And many of them are postgrad students, and many of them come from security universities in China. And they often, as we've discovered, have ended up on defense contracts as postgraduate students. Huawei have set up their headquarters in Cambridge. And what is interesting about that is we said that Huawei apparently was a real threat, which is why we couldn't award them the 5G contract. Yeah. But they've got their headquarters still here. Why does a company that's considered a threat allowed to sit right beside...
Well, this is the thing. So, MI5, MI6, the security service, everyone believes them to be a threat. We're constantly told this, So why is nothing being done? And as I put to you earlier, what should we be doing?
Well, we should be ferreting out all these individuals from the United Front because their task is to get close to the establishment, political establishment, and others. The very idea that a member of this organisation should have been allowed to get close to a member of the royal family without the security forces saying, hold on a second, what the hell is this bloke doing there? And I'm pretty certain they were already tracking him.
Yeah. So the point, the point when they know that this guy is sort of basically part of the pitch at the palace, the Prince Andrew's, his entrepreneurial scheme, which he used the palace's name and actually the palace itself for these events, even though he was actually on the take on it himself. It wasn't philanthropic. He was taking 2% of any deal. But so security services would have had suspicions about this guy. He's meeting people at the palace. He's got these roles. Why wouldn't, or do you think it might have happened and was ignored? Someone, they go to the palace, they say to Prince Andrew, yeah, you need to drop this guy because this guy is definitely dodgy. Why wouldn't that have happened?
I do not know, other than they might have been tracking to see who else he was in contact with for a while, and I can understand that. But eventually they decided to kick him out. But the main point was, you leave him talking. And in fact, the members of the royal family have gone to China, and he's one of them, the Duke of York. And, of course, while he was there, he was shepherded by this individual as well. So all of this is part of it. But, it's the tip of the iceberg, really. There's just huge numbers of individuals. You've got illegal police stations threatening dissidents with their families on television, being threatened they're going to arrest them and they'll do hard labor, etc. All of this stuff goes on. And what is really interesting is I was talking to the universities about a year ago, and most of the universities confess that they are now so dependent on Chinese money that if they were not to get the Chinese students, they would probably not be able to finance all the other students.
Yeah, well, tough, I would say. At that point, tough. I just find it extraordinary. Again, we've just been bought and paid for, and it's absolutely terrifying. And China, it's a deliberate policy by them. I don't know if we're going to resolve this anytime soon, and I'm certainly not sure. I mean, I think David Cameron and George Osborne were totally on their knees to China. I think Keir Starmer's going to be as well. In terms of our economy, and so much the rest of Europe. I mean, and we've walked into this, despite people like you talking about this very openly. Do you also think we're going to be sleepwalking back into the EU? There's lots of talk now about us going back in under sort of by hook or by crook by Keir Starmer. Of course, spent 3 years trying to campaign for the EU referendum result to be overturned by another referendum before it had even been enacted. Now talk about us going back into the European Court of Justice as part of a reset of EU relations. What do you make of that?
Well, it would be a disaster, and it would be a terrible blow to those who voted for it.
Can we stop it?
Yeah, we have to stop it.
How can we? He's got a massive majority.
Well, what's become very obvious now is everything he said beforehand was simply not true.
Yeah.
About what they planned to do, what they wouldn't do, all the guarantees about where, Brexit was voted for, we're not going to go back. But what they do is they strip away bits and pieces, piecemeal. So it might be a fishing agreement here to let our fishermen down again. That helps France come on side on something else. And slowly, bit by bit, we end up getting closer and closer till finally somebody says, do you know what? We might as well really be in because we're kind of half in with no say, which is what will always be the main bit. Well, we don't have a say now, so let's get back in and have a say. And this is ironic, really, because at the time globally when the European Union is losing its power and potency, I mean, its economy, there was a very good figure I saw the other day that over the last decade, America and Europe were roughly about the same size economically. America was about 13 trillion, and the EU about 10 years ago was about 12 trillion, something like that. I think the EU's gone up to around about 13 trillion, and America in the succeeding 10 years has gone to 23 trillion.
Yep.
So a growth by 50%. Who do you really want to go and do trade with? We trade better with America than anyone else. We have a trade surplus with the United States. You'd think he'd want to prioritize with Donald Trump a trade deal. And Donald Trump wants to do a trade deal. He really rather likes the United Kingdom and probably overlooked the fact that we've got a terrible left-wing government. But he would do a trade deal. And you'd want to do that because there's such huge opportunities in a growing economy like the United States. But no, they want to go back to what's that lovely thing about the burnt finger returns to the flame? Well, that's what Labour are all about. And
Absolutely.
China is part of this, by the way. They were constantly saying in opposition they'd be tough on China and criticising the Conservative government. But in reality, what they've done is they sound now and look like a kind of failed George Osborne tribute band.
Wow, what a concept. Well, I think the general rule, I think, with this government is definitely whatever Keir Starmer said before he became a Labour leader, and then won't say anything he said in the election campaign, just assume it's the opposite of that, and that's what's going to happen. Sir Iain Duncan Smith, thank you very much indeed for joining us, former Conservative Party leader. Just quick from Tom Slater, we're going to be talking actually about more failures in Europe. We're going to talk to Rolf Schellhammer next about that no confidence vote lost by your German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. It is extraordinary. We've got Macron and Olaf Scholz. I mean, German and the French leaders, supposed to be some of the leaders of the free world, they've got no power at home, collapsed governments. But yeah, let's go and tie ourselves closer to them.
I think it's just proof that the Remainers, particularly in the media and politics, claim they cared so much about Europe. They never pay attention to what's actually going on there. If they did, they would realise it's ridiculous to be talking about hugging the EU close precisely when its core member states and powers are in free fall politically and economically.